Joining me now, I have Lieutenant Chris Olivares with the Texas Department of Public Safety. Lieutenant, it's always good to see you. To Mills's point, President Trump signed a slew of these border orders last night. At my count, more than 10. How quickly does that change things on the ground for you and other border leaders?
Good morning, Mark. Great to be with you. Of course, I think we saw that yesterday with some of those executive orders, especially with the cancellation of the CBP One app, how effective it was that same day. So I do foresee that we are going to see changes just immediately. We're seeing it right now on the border right now, of course, with some of these executive orders. But, going back to some of these executive orders designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations and also the mass deportations, I think that in itself obviously is going to take some time as this process goes on. But we are seeing some of that immediate change just based off that CBP One app, which was allowing over 900,000 plus migrants to enter the United States, inadmissible. The fact that they were the outgoing administration was using mass parole to actually facilitate the CBP One app and the release of migrants into the country. That in itself is going to be a huge factor in decreasing the flow of migration at the border.
And Lieutenant, let me just, to your point, list off a couple more of these orders from the laundry list that we saw signed last night, declaring a national emergency at the border, stopping catch and release, reinstating Remain in Mexico, resuming border wall construction, designating cartels as global terrorists. What more do you want to see here in the coming days, sir?
Mark, I think that in itself is really something that we were looking for from the very beginning. I know Governor Abbott had provided a letter, back in 2022 to the outgoing president about what changes we needed on the border. And that was one of them, was actually designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, infrastructure, and the fact that we need to actually go back and follow the rule of law, federal law, that would help decrease the flow of migration. Of course, we didn't see that in the last 4 years, but now with some of these executive orders, I think it's going to help us in Texas and, of course, law enforcement across the border slow that flow of migration and focus on the needs of the country, and that is, border security, public safety threats, national security threats. I think it's going to give us more time now to actually do that. And the fact that now we have an ally with the federal government working together, it's really going to be more beneficial to us as, state law enforcement to actually focus more on border security and actually have the help from the federal government.
The rest of America wants a secure border and to be safe in their homes. Border agents say they know who they're looking for. News Nation's Allie Bradley got exclusive access to the numbers. There are 218,260 convicted criminals out of 1.4 million total illegal immigrants with what are called a final order of removal. They should be on a plane out. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, spoke about the deportations on CNN earlier.
ISIS, they're out there enforcing law out today, and of course, as I've said numerous times, they're concentrating on public safety threats. That'll be our priority right out of the gate. So ICE officers are back to doing their job. I wouldn't call them raids or target enforcement operations. They know exactly who they're looking for. They know pretty much where they'll find them.
Now, Democrats would love nothing more than the stories of families ripped apart for evening newscasts. We went through this once. Trump closed the border, then Democrats reflexively opened it. That didn't work out well for Democrats. For Team Trump to succeed, they must continually remind Americans who they are deporting and why. Former Navy SEAL Jonathan Gilliam will be with us in a minute about the fight against illegal immigration in the cartels south of the border. We go to WGN anchor Ben Bradley, live in Chicago, thankfully inside with us as that city gets ready to take Donald Trump to task or oppose him. Ben, good to see you. I get why J.B. Pritzker wants to oppose Donald Trump. He thinks it's going to work for him in Iowa or on the campaign trail raising money for president. Why Brandon Johnson?
Well, first of all, J.B. Pritzker doesn't need any money for his presidential campaign. He's a billionaire. Brandon Johnson's got approval ratings almost as cold as our weather in Chicago. Teens, basically. Listen, they have to appeal to their base. What I don't think they get, or they're now beginning to understand a little bit, is that their base, like the rest of the country, has moved. 2.5 million people in the blue state of Illinois voted for Donald Trump. More people in Chicago voted for Donald Trump than they did last time. The interesting thing is, here we are, Donald Trump promised mass deportations on day one. We're 30 hours in, and here in Chicago, which was supposed to be ground zero, we haven't seen any evidence of any deportation so far.
Okay, well, things sometimes take at least more than a few hours to get going. Fair to say there are people being sent back, and things at the border, we understand, are changing significantly. I think this is important, though, and you said that things in Chicago are changing, and we saw a lot of Brandon Johnson's constituents, a lot of African Americans in the poorer Chicago neighborhoods, furiously angry over the amount of illegal immigrants and the money being spent on them in Chicago. Has any of Brandon Johnson's
$400 million on 50,000 migrants in the last 2 years? $400 million. Yeah, there's a lot of people in Chicago who are angry about that. And there are a lot of people who are asking, okay, what do we do? The issue is not a Chicago problem, though. The reason Chicago police aren't cooperating with ICE agents is because of a state law signed by a former Republican governor that said local law enforcement, whether you're in Chicago, the suburbs, or downstate, can't cooperate with federal agents for the purpose of deportation and can't ask people or investigate somebody's immigration status. So, that's great reporting that Allie Bradley did to find that number of criminally convicted immigrants who are here who will be first, supposedly, on the deportation list. But if those folks are in jails or prisons in the state of Illinois, even if one was supposed to get out tomorrow, those folks who are running the jails can't call up ICE and say, hey, we got a guy coming out tomorrow. He's on your list. Come get him.
So the Pentagon now deployed 1,500 troops to help secure the U.S.-Mexico border.
And ICE moving at warp speed, arresting hundreds of illegal immigrants accused of serious crimes.
Griff Jenkins is in Washington with more. Hey, Griff.
Hey, good morning, guys. And Ainsley, you mentioned promises made, promises kept. Well, guess what? Consequences are being delivered. The crackdown has begun. President Trump could deploy, actually, as many as 10,000 active duty troops to the southern border. And while they may not engage in law enforcement, they will be engaging in protecting our border, including the use of military transport planes for deportation flights. Now, a Marine official telling Fox News this, quote, our response will be immediate. We are going in ready to respond. If the cartels shoot at us, we will not stand by. We will be taking whatever equipment we would send if a Marine Expeditionary Unit or MU were deploying overseas. Now, the 1,500 soldiers and Marines deploying right now represent a 60% increase from the already 2,500 that are there, and it comes as ICE's enforcement and removal officers have been hitting the streets across the country, launching early morning raids targeting some 700,000 criminal illegal aliens that have been roaming free under the Biden-Harris administration, protected in sanctuary cities like Boston. In fact, ICE has racked up more than 460 arrests in the first 33 hours since Trump took office. He sat down in the Oval Office last night with Hannity for his first interview and had this to say.
We talk Venezuela, that's a big abuser, but these are countries from Iran, the Congo, countries that you don't even think of, that much more than South America.
Now, here's the important note. Countries like Venezuela, where Trinidad Aragua comes from, or Iran, that harbors terrorists, they're recalcitrant countries, guys, meaning they don't currently take their citizens back. But President Trump told me last month, point blank, in Mar-a-Lago, he said they'll take them back or face economic consequences. Guys?
So, Griff, it sounds like up to 10,000 troops are going to be eventually heading down within the next period of days or weeks to our southern border. The Washington Post has got some juicy details, though. They say that Border Patrol agents are going to block migrants on the grounds that they have passed through countries where communicable diseases are present. They're going to say, you can't come in because you might have something. And they're also, even though they're going to try to claim asylum, now under this new executive order that they're apparently working on, only 2 people in the federal government will be able to allow them to be released into the country to asylum seekers. One is Mike Banks, the new chief of Border Patrol, and his deputy. So only 2 people. That means the flow is going to just stop immediately.
It sure will. And what you're talking about are, we have seen for the past 4 years, Steve, the notice to appear, where they just release them, particularly when they don't have any place to put them because so many thousands were coming. But ultimately, it is the asylum, the remove in Mexico or migrant protection protocols that has been reinstated, meaning that you have to go back to the country where you just came from, meaning in this case, Mexico, to wait for your asylum to play out. But under the Immigration and Nationality Act from 1965, there's a clause, 212F. You're going to hear a lot about that in the coming days because that gives broad authority to simply block and deny anyone from coming across to try and claim asylum on U.S. soil. And that is really the crux of what the Washington Post and what others are talking about. And if you do indeed bolster and supplement your force with these active duty U.S. military troops, you can stop the gaps in places like California, Arizona, and elsewhere where you don't have the Texas DPS with miles of razor wire and extra forces. You're going to reinforce blocking entry. And so that is going to be something that we're going to see play out in the very near future.
This latest deployment comes as new video shows buses full of migrants returning to Mexico from American detention centers after the Department of Homeland Security reinstated the Remain in Mexico policy. That means folks have to sit in Mexico while awaiting for any applications to get into the U.S. Under the program, officials can send asylum applicants back while they wait their day in court. News Nation's Jorge Ventura is live at the border in Texas tonight. And Jorge, what are you seeing on the ground, and where are these buses with these migrants heading back to Mexico coming from?
So Elizabeth, here I'm right outside the McAllen Hidalgo port of entry. Right across this is Reynosa, Mexico, and on Tuesday we witnessed buses of Mexican nationals deported back to Mexico. It's the first deportees under the Trump administration. We are now learning that those Mexican nationals were coming from the Donna and McAllen migrant detention centers right here in South Texas. And according to officials, they say it is a normal routine, but Mexican officials say they expect those scenes to ramp up dramatically of Mexican deportees heading back to Mexico, as well as foreign nationals. Now, we did speak with Mexican immigration officials who say that they have ramped up those resources. They are set to open 3 new shelters in Reynosa, Nuevo Laredo, and Matamoros. They will be able to hold up to 2,500 deportees, but those shelters will only accept Mexican nationals and not foreign nationals. Those shelters will also provide temporary lodging, medical checkups, and as well as transportation back to the country of origin. According to Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum, she has also launched the Mexico Embraces You program as Mexico gets prepared to take in those deportees. Take a listen to what Mexican immigration officials tell us on how they're preparing for that influx.
Somehow, almost everyone brings money for their journey, but they are also being supported with a discount from the federal government so they can purchase another bus ticket at a given amount at a discounted rate. Those buses are provided for free by the National Institute of Migration.
Mexican government is also providing those Mexican nationals around 2,000 pesos so they could return back home. Elizabeth, back to you.
In Washington, lawmakers are both celebrating and criticizing the way President Trump's mass deportation plan is playing out. Hundreds of arrests have already been made, and the president has brought in new federal resources to help. Here's national correspondent Christine Frizzell with the details.
It's an episode playing out on repeat in cities across America. This man arrested just outside of Boston. Fox News capturing these arrests also in Boston, which they say include MS-13 gang members and rape and murder suspects.
Jails and mental institutions from other countries and gang members right off the streets of the toughest cities in the world are being brought to the United States of America and emptied out into our country.
Donald Trump's Department of Homeland Security just granting new authorities to the Drug Enforcement Administration, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and the U.S. Marshals Service to assist with immigration enforcement. As his executive orders have declared, schools, hospitals, and churches are no longer off limits, with mixed messages coming from community leaders.
So whether it's a school, a church, a hospital, they need a warrant. And if they don't have it, they don't get in.
Supporters of President Trump's mass deportation plan celebrating the operations already being carried out.
He wants to rid our cities and our country of people who are members of the drug cartels, sex traffickers, gang members, criminals who have been wreaking havoc in cities like mine.
Her city of New York, as well as Boston, Philadelphia, Denver, Miami, and Washington, D.C., all sanctuary cities, among the cities targeted first, with nearly 500 arrests made, as some question the strategy.
Why is it not Tennessee? Why not Georgia? Why not Florida? Those where a large population of undocumented immigrants are, easy to find at these plants. So it's more of a political agenda than it is really that about sort of following out and carrying the law.
As these operations unfold in cities, the southern border itself is preparing for a flood of U.S. troops. 1,500 already ordered there, another 10,000 told to plan for the same.
Can you give me the latest numbers on the border?
Absolutely. Look, the greatest president in my lifetime, he's back. Because in 2 days, the last 24 hours, total apprehensions on the southwest border, 766. Compare that to the 10 to 12,000 Biden had at one time. CBP-1 releases, 0. CHNV, Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela releases, 0. Total of 766 across the entire southwest border. That is a game changer.
And that is just some of the plans that have been implemented so far. Now let's talk about the 22 governors, Democratic governors that plan on the attorney generals that are doing this. Tell me the legal authority that they have and the legal authority you guys have if they plan on resisting federal law.
Look, I find it strange that the attorney general from Arizona makes such statements because there was a lawsuit in Arizona a few years ago. The Show Me Your Papers lawsuit in highest courts in the land that said immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility. Federal responsibility. She has no say in the matter. And look, I've said many times, we said right out of the gate, Lawrence, right out of the gate, we're going to concentrate on public safety threats. So she's saying that she doesn't want public safety threats out of her community. I also am insulted by the term concentration camps. Are you serious? You're comparing ICE agents. We just lost a Border Patrol agent to a shooting up in Vermont yesterday, and they're the Gestapo. Are you serious? Concentration camps? ICE has detention centers. They have the best standards in the entire industry. I'll compare ICE detention standards to any state or federal facility or any county facility in the entire world. We have the highest detention standards, so that's an insult and it's a lie.
It was a busy weekend for sure for ICE, the agency arresting nearly 300 illegal immigrants on Saturday alone and nearly 1,000 on Sunday. ICE also lodging nearly 800 detainers, which means there is probable cause to deport. And according to border czar Tom Homan, this is only the beginning.
Yes, but you can see the numbers steadily increase, the number of arrests nationwide as we open up the aperture. Right now it's concentrating public safety threats, national security threats. That's a smaller population. So we're going to do this on priority basis, as President Trump's promised, but as that aperture opens, there'll be more arrests nationwide.
And we are getting a look at how these deportations are being carried out. You can see agents loading criminal migrants onto a military plane there, the flight bound for their country of origin.
We do have some breaking news that we want to bring to you from Fox News' Bill Maloogian reporting of a situation happening at the border right now. He is reporting per multiple law enforcement sources within the last hour, Border Patrol agents near Fronton, Texas, were fired upon from Mexico by suspected cartel gunmen as a group of illegal aliens were being brought across the river. I'm told that Border Patrol returned fire. Nobody hit on either side right there. And we are going to continue on with this as Texas DPS tells Bill Maloogian that they are now patrolling the area and has a drone in the air and can see Mexican military assets now staging on the other side of the river there. So again, we are going to be following this story here for you on Live Now from Fox. It is very fluid at this moment, but this comes at a time when big changes are happening at the White House when it comes to border security, and a lot of these measures are taking place pretty much on a daily basis. We're also seeing mass deportations happening really now every day, as just yesterday, more than 900 people were picked up from major cities, from Boston to Los Angeles as well. And we were bringing that to you, just some of the many, many arrests that were happening yesterday, including an ISIS member that was accused there of crossing the border illegal as well. So again, some major disturbances though happening on the border. There's gunshots reportedly fired at U.S. Border Patrol agents. They are investigating right now, and we will keep an eye on this developing story for you.
So my first day back from having a nice life, it's my honor to welcome three of the world's leading technology CEOs. And in the case of Larry Ellison, it's well beyond technology. He's sort of CEO of everything. He's an amazing man, an amazing business person. But to announce the largest AI infrastructure project by far in history, and it's all taking place right here in America. As you know, there's great competition for AI and other things, and they're coming in at the highest level. We're joined by Oracle Executive Chairman Larry Ellison, SoftBank CEO, my friend Masa Yoshi's son, and CEO of OpenAI, and I would say the by far the leading expert based on everything I read, Sam Altman. So that's great that you're coming in together. That's a massive group of talent and money. Together, these world-leading technology giants are announcing the formation of Stargate. So put that name down in your books, because I think you're going to hear a lot about it in the future. A new American company that will invest $500 billion at least in AI infrastructure in the United States, and very, very quickly, moving very rapidly, creating over 100,000 American jobs almost immediately. This monumental undertaking is a resounding declaration of confidence in America's potential under a new president. Let me be a new president. I didn't say it, they did. So I appreciate that, fellas. But it'll ensure the future of technology. What we want to do is we want to keep it in this country. China is a competitor and others are competitors. We want it to be in this country, and we're making it available. I'm going to help a lot through emergency declarations, because we have an emergency. We have to get this stuff built. So they have to produce a lot of electricity, and we'll make it possible for them to get that production done very easily at their own plants if they want, where they'll build at the plant, the AI plant, they'll build energy generation, and that will be incredible. But it's technology and artificial intelligence, all made in the USA. Beginning immediately, Stargate will be building the physical and virtual infrastructure to power the next generation of advancements in AI, and this will include the construction of colossal data centers, very, very massive structures. I was in the real estate business. These buildings, these are big, beautiful buildings. They're going to employ a lot of people.
Logical.
President Donald Trump wasting no time to fulfill some campaign promises and purge the federal government. His administration, via an Office of Personnel Management memo, ordered that all federal employees with DEI jobs be placed on paid leave by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, and that all DEI offices and programs should be shut down.
The memo followed Trump's executive order, which overturned President Lyndon Johnson's 1965 order that established affirmative action and anti-discrimination protections. The memo also warned against disguising DEI programs using coded language, and it said that employees who witness this and fail to disclose the information within a 10-day period will face adverse consequences.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt wrote in a statement, President Trump campaigned on ending the scourge of DEI from our federal government and returning America to a merit-based society where people are hired based on their skills, not for the color of their skin. This is another win for all Americans, for Americans of all races, religions, and creeds. Promises made, promises kept.
Meanwhile, the Congressional Black Caucus responded to Trump's move, writing, "This executive order is nothing short of an attempt to take our country backward and does nothing to help our communities grow economically or address the costs of living for hard-working American families. This executive order is not only a broken economic promise, it stands in opposition to evidence which shows that diversity initiatives improve the government's ability to better serve our communities."
Earlier on Tuesday, the White House announced that the Transportation Department and the Federal Aviation Administration would stop DEI hiring practices and quote, return to merit-based hiring in another move to pare down the federal workforce. The White House on Tuesday demanded that federal agencies list employees who are on a probationary period and recommend who should keep their jobs.
University of Michigan professor Don Moynihan wrote on Blue Sky, quote, "This isn't about woke government or DEI. It is removing civil rights era protections against discrimination."
On the other side, podcast host Megyn Kelly wrote on X, "It's like we went to sleep, woke up, and all of our dreams have come true." Babylon Bee managing editor Joel Berry said, "Okay, now it's time for Congress to pass these Trump executive orders into law. What's stopping Congress from enshrining Remain in Mexico or no DEI in government? We have both houses. What is stopping us?" That is a good sentiment from the conservative side of things, because we don't want to create a reality where if we lose in 4 years, somebody comes in and just does executive orders reversing all this. Yeah. So I suspect we're going to disagree heartily here. But
well, on the merits of DEI, I suspect we are. But yeah,
yes,
go ahead.
We are. Look, I would say that this is certainly not about reversing non-discrimination. It remains the law of the land that you cannot have discriminatory hiring. The conservative criticism of at least aspects of DEI, sometimes it's not even clear what we're talking about DEI, but especially the hiring and if school admissions, that kind of thing, the conservative position, and actually I would say it's the majority position within the country, if you try to pass these things, even in like liberal California, they've often failed, is that the most qualified people should be staffing the administration, that it's not. It's also, if a private employer really wants to do DEI hiring, am I going to stand in their way? I think it's silly, but I guess I really don't care. It's your company, but this is the federal government we're talking about. This is our tax dollars being spent. I can't speak, I guess, for all of the American people, but it's very clear, I think, that Donald Trump ran on the platform of ending a kind of race-based consideration or other-based consideration in hiring. And also I disagree with, was that the Congressional Black Caucus saying that there's a lot of scientific evidence of benefits to these initiatives. That is simply not true. Maybe there's some evidence. There are also a lot of studies really calling into question specifically the implicit bias training module, which causes more consternation than it solves. Maybe some of these people were doing good work, as with our very contentious J6 conversation yesterday. I don't love blanket whatever. I would like it to be a case-by-case basis, but overall, I'm certainly satisfied with this policy.
So let me counter your criticism of the CBC by saying, quoting Megyn Kelly on diversity initiatives. So white Jesus lady herself is not necessarily the way forward in these respects.
Oh, snap! My message to every business in the world is very simple. Come make your product in America, and we will give you among the lowest taxes of any nation on earth. We're bringing them down very substantially, even from the original Trump tax cuts. But if you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff, differing amounts, but a tariff.
This is precisely what Richard was talking about there. Now, I wanted our viewers to hear it for themselves. You, Jeff, were with Donald Trump when he went to Davos, physically went there, not virtually like today. That was 6 years ago. What's your takeaway from what you heard?
Look, there's no doubt that the message is largely similar in terms of America is open for business. But what is different, I think, is just the confidence in which he speaks and the delight he takes in rattling the cages of global leaders, from the business sector to global government leaders. I mean, I think saying that, again, urging and calling on NATO to spend 5% of their GDP on defense. That is something he has said before, but never as president. But I think what we also saw there was something that we are going to be measuring this presidency by. That is the degree to how much he looks forward and how much he looks backward. And there was definitely a mix of that in this. He started the speech talking again about President Biden and still trying to cling to President Biden as a foil, still trying to sort of use the metric of that last administration as a way to propel this one. Well, soon, I mean, this is Donald Trump's government now, so we will see how long that lasts. But also raising the point of taxes. We've seen a flurry of executive actions. Donald Trump's presidency is going to be measured on his legislative successes, and lowering taxes, as he was talking about, the business taxes, the corporate taxes, is going to take Congress to work together. So I think that is something we are still waiting to see the president sort of to see if he can sort of corral Republicans here with the very slim majorities into doing this.
We've signed some executive orders. They were very important in just about every case. And it will go through the first one, please.
Do you want to? Yeah, Mr. President, this is an executive order on crypto. We're going to be. Oh, sorry, we're doing AI first. Sorry, Mr. President, this is an executive order on AI. We're basically announcing the administration's policy to make America the world capital in artificial intelligence and to dominate and to lead the world in AI.
Do you want to say your name, your full name?
Yeah, David
and
Sachs,
serial?
AI and Crypto Czar.
David is one of the greatest in the world at AI. Most respected, probably, there is.
Yeah, this is the Crypto EO. We're going to be forming an internal working group to make to make America the world capital in crypto under your leadership.
Which is really going up, right?
Absolutely.
This is an executive order establishing a presidential commission, an advisory commission on science and technology.
Good. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
The basic idea is to get together top people from government, the private sector, technology industry, as well as educational institutions, to make sure that America maintains its leadership position with respect to science and technology development in the years ahead.
Marco is one of my favorite people in Washington, and you know he's a son of Cuban immigrants to this country. He grew up in very humble beginnings, but he has an incredibly deep love of our nation. He is a bipartisan solutions seeker, a guy who can actually get things done, but a conservative of great principle and great vision. And I think more than almost anybody that I've met in Washington the last few years, Senator Rubio, I think, understands the distinctive priorities of President Trump and why it represents such a significant and frankly important and needed departure from a generation of failed foreign policy. Senator Rubio will be the chief diplomat of the United States of America, but he will remain a friend. I'm proud to know him, and I'm proud to do this. So, Senator Rubio, thank you. So, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Marco Rubio.
I, Marco Rubio.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend.
That I will support and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies.
Against all enemies.
Foreign and domestic.
Foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
The duties of the office of which I'm about to enter.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for making time. It's been a busy 72 hours, yeah, maybe longer, but 96 hours, I guess. But first, I want to thank Jeanette, my wife, who has been so supportive. As the Vice President knows well, it's impossible to do any of these jobs we do here, including the Senate, but now in this new role, without the support of our family and particularly of our spouses. And so thank you for being supportive every step of the way. I would not stand here before you today without that.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to have you here. I'm thrilled to be joined, of course, by our incoming Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, John Ratcliffe, as well as his lovely wife, Michelle. And I will say that John is a great patriot, a guy that has the trust of the President, and I think really believes deeply in the mission, first of all, of keeping Americans safe, but also doing it in a way that ensures that the American people have confidence in our national intelligence services. And both of those things really matter. We're not going to have much safety, and we're going to have a great intelligence services unless the American people actually trust that those intelligence services are doing their job. And I have every confidence that John Ratcliffe is going to do that. That's why the President nominated him, and that's why the Senate confirmed him with big margins. Now, normally, after I administer the oath, I would actually invite the new guy to say a few words, but given that he's the leader of the CIA, anything that he told you, he would have to, well, you know how that goes. So John Ratcliffe is not going to give any remarks because every piece of knowledge in his brain is actually classified. So he's going to head straight to Langley and do his job that the American people need him to do. So John, are you ready? I'm ready. Okay, please place your hand on the Bible. Raise your right hand. I, John Ratcliffe.
I, John Ratcliffe,
do solemnly swear
that
I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
See you guys. Take care.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I'm about to enter. So help me God. Congratulations.
All right.
Well, good morning, everybody. I am so happy to be here today and so thrilled to be able to swear in our new Secretary of Defense, and we are honored to have him. Now, before we do that, I have to say a few words of appreciation. First, of course, to the President of the United States for nominating a person who is respected and adored by the warfighters. This is a Secretary of Defense who will stand up for the men and women that we send overseas to fight our nation's wars. I think a lot of them feel that they haven't had somebody who's had their back. That will change because the President of the United States nominated this guy, and we are grateful to President Trump for doing so. I also want to say thank you to my Senate colleagues. It turns out we couldn't spare one, and all of you did an incredible job. In particular, my dear friend Roger Wicker, thank you for shepherding Pete through the committee. Roger did a great job. And in addition, all of the members of the Senate Armed Services Committee, who I know gave Pete the vetting and the hearing that he deserved, and I'm glad that we all ultimately decided that the President's nominee for Secretary of Defense ought to be our actual Secretary of Defense, and we're here today. I'm going to say one final thing. If you look at what has separated President Trump from so many of the people who came before him, it is the view that, number one, we should be sparing in how we deploy our most precious resource, which is the men and women who are willing to put on the uniform and put their life on the line for this country. We shouldn't send them everywhere, But two, when we do send them anywhere, we ought to empower them with the tools necessary to fight and win quickly and come home afterwards. And that is what sets this administration apart, and that's what Pete Hegseth represents. Now, finally, I, of course, have to thank the nominee himself. Pete, thank you for being willing to put yourself out there. I think you've shown yourself a man of deep character and of resolve over the last few months. Jennifer, thank you for standing by, our new Secretary of Defense, and your beautiful family, from your kids to the extended family. You guys did a hell of a job. We're proud of you, and we're glad to have you in Washington as we work to make America great again. So with that, let me administer the oath of office. Kids, come on up. All right, put your hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, and repeat after me. I, Pete Hegseth.
I, Pete Hegseth.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
The duties of the office of which I am about to enter.
So help you God?
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Secretary.
The yeas are 68, the nays are 29. The confirmation is confirmed.
Another one of Trump's picks to join his cabinet has been confirmed with bipartisan support. Scott Bessent is the new Treasury Secretary after a 68-29 vote. During his confirmation hearing earlier this month, he voiced his support to make the 2017 Trump tax cuts permanent.
Mr. Secretary, your career exemplifies a life of public service, advocating for core American interests all over the globe. In these challenging times, we need principled, strong leadership. And that is why we are so happy to have you with your experience, your dedication, and your energy to lead us. Thank you. Your team, who are obviously very happy to see you, have proudly supported so many of your trips abroad, where you've advanced security in the Middle East, helped us to sustain our counterterrorism fight, and inspired so many with your walk across the Simón Bolívar Bridge. Mr. Secretary, the men and women of this department are ready to get to work, advancing the agenda of President Trump and of yourself. And with that, I will welcome you to the Department of State. Colleagues, the 72nd Secretary of State, Marco Rubio.
Thank you. Thank you. I am new to this department. Today is my first day on the job, literally, but I am not a stranger to it. I have interacted with many of you, both in my travels abroad and in our daily functions. My job now is different, and our job in some ways will be different. In our republic, the voters decide the course of our nation, both domestically and abroad, and they have elected Donald J. Trump as our president when it comes to foreign policy on a very clear mission. And that mission is to ensure that our foreign policy is centered on one thing, and that is the advancement of our national interest, which they have clearly defined through his campaign as anything that makes us stronger or safer or more prosperous. And that will be our mission. That will be our job across the world, is to ensure that we have a foreign policy that advances the national interest of the United States. I expect every nation on earth to advance their national interests. And in those instances, and I hope there will be many, in which our national interest and theirs align, we look forward to working with them. This is in many ways, and again it was referenced by President Trump yesterday in his speech, that he designs that his overriding goal for global policy is the promotion of peace, the avoidance of conflict, and no agency will be more critical in that regard than this one. In fact, it's its founding principle and purpose, and that's what we endeavor to do, to promote peace around the world, because that's in our national interest. Without peace, it is hard to be a strong nation, a prosperous nation, and one that is better off. But there will also be challenges. We recognize that there will be those times, unfortunately, as humans interact with one another because of our nature, but there will be conflict. We will seek to prevent them and avoid them, but never at the expense of our national security, never at the expense of our national interests, and never at the expense of our core values as a nation and as a people. We are, at the end of the day, a nation founded on a powerful principle. And that powerful principle is that all men are created equal, because our rights come from God, our Creator, not from our laws, not from our governments. And we hope the entire world can one day live under that, and we will always, always be strong defenders of that principle, never at the expense of our national interest, never at the expense of pragmatic foreign policy, never at the expense of the reality that oftentimes in foreign policy our choices are not between a bad option and a good option. Sometimes in foreign relations our options are two bad ones, and we're just trying to figure out which one of them is least bad. And that's unfortunate, but it is true. And that's a tough job. It's our job, and we'll seek to do it right and well. That is the core mission of this agency, and it will be the core mission while Donald Trump is president, and we will be effective on his behalf. I also want this agency to be, and I don't mean, not that it's irrelevant now, but I want it to be where it belongs. I want the Department of State to be at the center of how America engages the world. Not just how we execute on it, but on how we formulate it. Some of the brightest minds in foreign policy reside within this building and within this government. And we need to ensure that we have an environment here that's conducive to creativity, to boldness, to new ideas, to recognizing the dynamic world in which we live, one that is changing faster than it has ever changed before. And we need to be ahead of it. When the time comes for the principals to gather, or even deputies, I want the Department of State to have the best ideas and the best options available for the President. And then I want us to be able to execute them better than any agency in our government. That will also be a task of mine. I have watched from the congressional side from time to time administrations in both parties, in which sometimes the Department of State has been sort of relegated to a secondary role because some other agency can move faster or seems to be bolder or more creative. It's not your fault, but we're going to change that. We want to be at the centerpiece. We want to be at the core of how we formulate foreign policy, because we're going to have the best ideas of any agency, and because we're going to execute it better and faster and more effectively than any other agency in our government. And I know we have the right team to do it. There's no other agency in the world, there's no other agency in our government that I'd rather lead, because of the talent that's collected here in this room and those watching around the world. That will be our mission, and I hope we'll be able to do it together. There will be changes, but the changes are not meant to be destructive. They're not meant to be punitive. They're not out of... The changes will be because we need to be a 21st century agency that can move, by a cliche that's used by many, at the speed of relevance. But we need to move faster than we ever have, because the world is changing faster than we ever have. And we have to have a view that some say it's called look around the corner, but we really need to be thinking about where are we going to be in 5, 7, 10, or 15 years. Some of the issues that confront humanity today have no precedent. They have no historic precedent. Some of the challenges we face have no historic precedent. We can compare it to another era, to another time, but they're not the same. Things are moving faster than ever. Think about how much the world has changed in the last 5 years. Imagine how much it will change over the next 25 years. And my sincerest hope and my prayer is that we will, as a nation, be able to leave the future generations with a country and a planet safer and better than the one that was left for us. And you will be a big part of achieving that goal. It is an honor to be able to lead this agency. I hope to do it with distinction and with integrity, working harder than anyone ever has at this role. And that will not be easy, because some pretty hard-working people have come before me. But I know that we are up to the task. And I'm glad that I'm in the job, that I'm in the job on day one. I was sworn in at about 9:15. I didn't mess up the oath. And we're ready to go to work, and I know you are as well. Thank you. God bless all of you. God bless our country. Thank you.
That boy is good.
Thousands of Palestinians returned to the Gaza Strip. You can see the huge crowds walking in Israel after it opened up the crossing after a ceasefire with Hamas. Many sheltered in tent camps for more than a year. Israel delayed the return 2 days after Hamas changed the order of the hostages it released, but worked out that dispute overnight. And today marks 80 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. About 1.1 million people, mostly Jewish people, were murdered in the largest Nazi concentration and death camp in southern Poland. About 6 million European Jews were killed in the Holocaust during World War II.
Hey, how are you? Good. Good day. I'm going to sign slowly to tell me something. Are we getting these away? Let me just say, as we're here today, that we're really grateful. This will be the first bill signed by the President. My colleagues did extraordinary work from Georgia. All the Georgia delegation worked so hard on this. This is the right thing to do. It's a really important moment for the country, and it's always good when the right thing is also the popular thing. And this is what the American people demand and deserve. They want accountability. They want us to address the human catastrophe that has come from the broken, wide-open border that Biden, Harris, Mayorkas, and the team did for the country. And we are so grateful. We have a new commander-in-chief, a new sheriff in town, who is willing to stand for border security, safety, the sovereignty of the American people, and that we have all these strong leaders in Congress who are standing with the President to get this job done for the American people. This is our priority. It's the country's priority, and it's the right thing to do. Our hearts, our prayers continue for Laken's family and all those who've been affected by the violent criminals who've been allowed to come across that border. And we're going to stop it, and it begins today. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all.
Moments ago, President Donald Trump says he has issued his first tariff on Colombia after 2 U.S. deportation flights of undocumented migrants were not allowed to land in Colombia. CNN's Steve Contorno is joining us now live from Florida. Steve, tell us more.
Yeah, Fred, just moments ago, Donald Trump reacting to the news that Colombia had blocked planes carrying undocumented migrants from delivering those individuals back to their home country, and Trump now retaliating with tariffs and threats of more tariffs. He said in a post on social media, quote, "I was just informed that the 2 repatriation flights from the United States with a large number of illegal criminals were not allowed to land in Colombia. This order was given by Colombia's socialist president, Gustavo Petro, who is already very unpopular amongst his people. Petro's denial of these flights has jeopardized the national security and public safety of the United States." So he has then goes on to say that he is taking some action against the Colombian government, including a 25% tariff on goods coming from Colombia immediately, and he's threatening to raise that to up to 50% next week. He also is calling for a travel ban and immediate visa revocations on the Colombian government officials and sanctions on party members and family members that support the Colombian government. So, Fred, this is an early example of how Donald Trump's immigration crackdown is already colliding with his foreign policy and trade proposals, and the first of maybe more to come, Fred.
It took not even 1 week for Trump to make good on his threat to impose tariffs on a foreign country. Today, the Trump administration attempted to land a migrant deportation flight in Colombia. The Colombian government rejected that effort, causing Trump to post the following on Truth Social. "I was just informed that 2 repatriation flights from the United States with a large number of illegal criminals were not allowed to land in Colombia. The order was given by Colombia's socialist president, Gustavo Petro, who is already very unpopular amongst his people. Petro's denial of these flights has jeopardized the national security and public safety safety of the U.S., so I've directed my administration to immediately take the following urgent and decisive retaliatory measures. Emergency 25% tariffs on all goods coming into the United States. In 1 week, the 25% tariffs will be raised to 50%. A travel ban and immediate visa revocation on the Colombian government officials and all allies and supporters, visa sanctions on all party members, family members, and supporters of the Colombian government, enhanced customs and border protection inspections of all Colombian nationals and cargo on national security grounds, treasury, banking, and financial sanctions to be fully imposed. These measures are just the beginning. We will not allow the Colombian government to violate its legal obligations with regard to the acceptance and return of the criminals they forced into the United States. So 25% tariffs have been imposed on Colombia, expected to double to 50% in a week. And as expected, the president of Colombia wasted no time retaliating himself on behalf of his own country. He took to Twitter, posting a long reply, which is translated to read, in part, "I don't like your oil, Trump. You are going to wipe out the human species because of greed. Maybe one day over a glass of whiskey, which I accept despite my gastritis, we can talk frankly about this, but it's difficult because you consider me an inferior race and I'm not, nor is any Colombian. If you know someone who is stubborn, that's me, period. You can try and carry out a coup with your economic strength and your arrogance, like they did with Hollande, but I will die in my law. I resisted torture and I resist you. I don't want slavers next to Colombia. We already had many and we freed ourselves. You will kill me, but I will survive in my people, which is before yours in the Americas. We are people of the winds, the mountains, the Caribbean Sea, and of freedom. You don't like our freedom? Okay. I don't shake hands with white slavers. I shake hands with the white libertarian heirs of Lincoln and the black and white farm boys of the USA, at whose graves I cried and prayed on a battlefield, which I reached after walking the mountains of Italian Tuscany and after being saved from COVID. They are the United States, and before them I kneel, before no one else. Overthrow me, President, and the Americas, and humanity will respond. Your blockade does not scare me, because Colombia, besides being a country of beauty, is the heart of the world. I know you love beauty as I do. Do not respect it, and you will give it your sweetness. From today on, Colombia is open to the entire world with open arms. We are builders of freedom, life, and humanity. I am informed that you imposed a 50% tariff on the fruits of our human labor to enter the United States, and I do the same. Let our people plant corn that was discovered in Colombia and feed the world." And so now, less than 1 week into Trump's second term, the U.S. finds itself in the midst of a trade war. And I've said hundreds of times before, and I will continue to say now, there are no winners in a trade war.
Excuse me? Excuse me? Excuse me?
The White House overnight saying Colombia's government agreed to accept deported migrants. Colombian officials say its foreign minister and ambassador would travel to Washington, D.C. in the next several hours to continue discussing the agreement. Late last night, the White House said in a statement, the government of Colombia has agreed to all of President Trump's terms, including the unrestricted acceptance of all illegal aliens from Colombia without limitation or delay. This after tension spiked over the weekend as Colombia's president initially refused to allow U.S. military deportation flights, saying the U.S. cannot treat Colombian migrants as criminals. President Trump threatened retaliatory measures, a travel ban, and 25% tariffs on Colombian exports. Colombia changed course, striking a deal. The White House said the president expects other nations to fully cooperate.
We'll start the ass kissing with you.
Picking up where he left off, President Trump signed a flurry of restrictive immigration executive orders on day one. He reinstigated the Remain in Mexico policy, one of the most controversial programs implemented during his first term. He also paused refugee admissions, officially designated Mexican cartels terrorist organizations, and signed a proclamation declaring a national emergency at the southern border, where an increased military presence will be stationed.
Trump also ended birthright citizenship for children born to parents living in the U.S. illegally. Critics say this is a violation of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. Joining us now to dive into these executive orders and challenges they might face is David Beer, Director of Immigration Studies at the Cato Institute. Welcome, David.
Thanks for having me.
So what is your view of this effort to change this aspect of the immigration policy?
Well, you listed, a dozen things already, and you haven't even covered half of it. So there's a lot going on. It's happening very rapidly. Obviously, this is a major change in policy. Look, my view is birthright citizenship is a fundamental part of U.S. Law and has been since the founding of the United States. Dred Scott decision was in a departure from that. The 14th Amendment was meant to rectify that mistake, but there's never been a time where people who are born in the United States as civilians and not representatives of foreign governments are not considered U.S. Citizens. And so that is extraordinarily dangerous. It's an assertion that the President of the United States, by a stroke of a pen, can take away the citizenship rights of Americans. And so I'm very concerned about that. Obviously, it's going to be challenged in the courts. He also declared that there's an invasion at the southwest border of the United States. This is, again, extraordinarily problematic when you consider it in the context of the Constitution. The Constitution says that when the United States is subject to an invasion, the U.S. government can wage war inside the United States in response. Also, state governments can wage war, and all of that, what that would entail, all the powers that opens up over Americans inside the United States, as well as potential military action across our border with Mexico. And the final thing it does under the Constitution is if we're subject to invasion, then the federal government can suspend the writ of habeas corpus, which is our rights as Americans to challenge wrongful detention. We can be seized and detained at any time when habeas corpus is suspended. So that is, just a small sampling of how expansive the powers being asserted here are. And even with respect to, what you mentioned, something that seems kind of common sense, labeling these awful drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Again, because you're talking about them, he is talking about them invading on behalf of foreign governments. That means that we're potentially setting up a situation where the President of the United States has declared that we are at war with any number of different governments. Again, this is troubling territory to enter into. The implications were not thought through before he signed these orders.
Some reactions to Donald Trump's first couple days right now actually overstate what he's doing, what he can do, his actual powers, which strangely echoes Trump's own exaggerated claims. Now, look, immigration has been a challenge for decades in this country. Donald Trump's first term faced high migration, as did Biden's recently completed term, which is why President Biden deported over 270,000 migrants in 1 year. That was one of the highest, which surpassed recent records by not only Trump, but other presidents. So that's a lawful deportation power, which the most recent president used and which Donald Trump used and is using. Deporting people, even at pretty high numbers, is not, to say the obvious, not specific to this week of this new administration. And doing that alone, to be clear, factually, is not a, quote, power grab. Now, I'm saying that as a fact. If people who agree with or like the new president find that to be a positive thing, that's fine. In politics, we're well aware of all the different reactions people have, but that's just a fact. And again, the recent Biden administration did a lot of deportations, and we're now seeing promises to do that many or more. That's over here. Over here, vowing to potentially deploy the United States military in this country, or flatly breaking the Constitution or abusing federal powers to investigate, prosecute, arrest, or even jail local elected officials. Well, that's something else. Those are, as described and would be if enacted, abuses of power. And those could also be halted in court, just like what you see on your screen if you remember the moments of the past first-term Trump immigration plan, some of which overreached. Not in a sense of an opinion or in a policy sense, but overreached past what was legally allowed. And so they were ultimately changed, narrowed, and sometimes halted on an emergency basis in the courts. So right now, with that in mind, the distinction I'm reminding you of, Donald Trump, the new president, is pushing the line the most in two areas. Freeing those violent MAGA convicts, which is our top story last night, and we have more on that tonight. It's an extraordinary, and many police veterans say dangerous action. And in immigration, which has more direct opposition now coming to the forefront tonight on the ground.
Connecticut has never quit on people. We're never going to surrender, and I am never going to back down.
We are here to fight.
Fight.
You come for my people. You come through me.
Our 5-member delegation is planning to push back, fight back.
Presidents in this country have broad powers, but they are not kings.
We will now do ICE's job for them on a whole number of fronts. We're not going to do federal immigration enforcement.
If there is any attack on the Garden State or on any of its communities from Washington, I will fight back with every fiber of my being.
I have one message for President Trump. I'll see you in court.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well this morning. Thank you for being here today. I'd like to begin by thanking my fellow members of Congress who have joined me for this very, very important discussion about our border security. Your commitment to addressing the extremely harmful exploitation of our immigration system is deeply appreciated. Today, we come together to address a matter of great significance, the integrity of American citizenship. President Trump has made it clear that restoring fairness to our immigration system and defending the true intent of the 14th Amendment are central to his vision of making America great again. His historic executive order to end birthright citizenship marks a critical step forward. And now, with the Birthright Citizenship Act of 2025, we can solidify these reforms into lasting law and codify them. This bill is quite simple. Let me share with you the criteria for automatic citizenship. Citizenship will be granted only to children born in the United States with at least one parent who is, 1, a U.S. citizen or national, 2, a lawful permanent resident, and 3, a lawful resident who is serving in the military. This is about ensuring the citizenship, a cornerstone of our national identity. It is protected, respected, and aligned with the principles upon which this country was built. This is the time, ladies and gentlemen, to pass this legislation, which has been plaguing our country for well over 100 years. This opportunity will not come again, at least not for a long, long time. So please strongly urge your members of Congress to co-sponsor and vote for this important bill.
22 states are now suing the government over President Trump's decision to end birthright citizenship.
Birthright citizenship is the idea that children born in America whose parents are undocumented immigrants automatically gain citizenship.
Birthright citizenship defenders tend to point to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution.
The specific clause often cited within that amendment reads, "All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside." Senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Amy Swearer, however, disagrees with the notion entirely.
Swearer, in the abstract of her 75-page paper on the topic, writes, while it is indeed clear that the Constitution recognizes that citizenship is the birthright of certain U.S.-born individuals, both textualist and originalist analyses of the Citizenship Clause substantially undermine assertions that birthright citizenship must be applied universally to all persons born on U.S. soil, regardless of the immigration status of their parents. Joining us now to dive deeper into her point of view is Amy Swearer. Amy, welcome to Rising.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
So why don't you elaborate on your argument? For years we've heard that it's pretty unambiguous that that even if you've come to the country illegally, if you give birth here, your children are American citizens from birth. But you say it's more complicated than that. Can you explain why?
Absolutely. So I'm fully aware that many Americans today, and in fact, probably most legal scholars, simply assume that we have what I'd refer to as universal birthright citizenship, that we follow sort of the old English common law that universally grants citizenship to anyone born in this country under any circumstances, except for maybe the children of like foreign ministers, foreign ambassadors, etc. But the reality is, when you look at the original public meaning of the 14th Amendment, when you look at what these words meant to the people who drafted and ratified that amendment to the Constitution, they were very clear. While they were trying, of course, to override the Dred Scott decision and make citizens of the newly freed slaves, that the Supreme Court in Dred Scott said they're not citizens, they can never be citizens, even though they owe their allegiance nowhere else, Congress was absolutely trying to make citizens of them and to eliminate permanent racial barriers to citizenship. But they were also explicitly trying to exclude certain classes of people, not based on race, but based on their lack of total, complete political allegiance to the United States that didn't put them in anywhere near similar footing to those newly freed slaves who owed their allegiance nowhere else.
But Amy, I want to get on to another case on the legal point of this, and I know you're aware of it because you allude to it in one of the pieces that I read, which you wrote. An 1898 Supreme Court case, which I'm sure our audience will be delighted to plunge into, but it's the US versus Wong Kim Ark. And to explain that briefly, this is about a 21-year-old person who had been born in San Francisco to Chinese immigrant parents. And his parents at the time, by virtue of being Chinese, there were a lot of restrictionist laws and they could not become citizens. He left the country and was not allowed back in because they said he wasn't a citizen. And he took that case to the Supreme Court. Now, before I go on to describe the judgment, is that basically an accurate summation of the underlying case?
Yeah, that is exactly what happened to Wong Kim Ark, yes.
So then, when it comes to the Supreme Court, they rule in his favour by a 6-2 majority. And Justice Horace Gray, for the majority, writes that the case, and I quote, affirms the ancient and fundamental rule of citizenship by birth within the territory. And he then goes on to say that the 14th Amendment is declaratory in form and enabling and extending in effect. So, I mean, that seems pretty clear to me. You obviously don't think that that applies in this case, but the language seems fairly clear. So what is your argument to counter that?
So if that were the only language in that opinion, I'd probably agree with you. But the reality is that opinion doesn't actually follow in its own practice what the common law analysis would have been. So at common law, that analysis from that court would have been very simple. It would have been Wong Kim Ark was born here. He is not the child of an ambassador or any sort of legally accredited foreign national. Therefore, he is a citizen. Instead, the court very narrowly holds and repeatedly emphasizes the lawful permanent residency of Wong Kim Ark's parents. That is irrelevant to anything under the Old English common law. And so actually my thesis within the article that you mentioned is that what the court is doing is sort of recognizing an Americanized version of that common law. And I think to that extent, that limited holding that the U.S.-born children of permanently domiciled, lawfully present aliens, what we would today consider lawful permanent residents, that they are U.S. citizens, I think that's perfectly consistent with, one, what the original public meaning of the 14th Amendment was, but also with this idea of this Americanized jus soli, this Americanized birthright citizenship, which is not nearly as broad as the Old English common law. And you see this even in a Yale Law Review article from that same year commenting on this case, where it recognizes that unlike the Old English common law, where even being a temporary sojourner was enough for the child of that person to be considered a citizen of that nation, the American common law doesn't allow for that. That permanent domicile, permanent residency is what makes that U.S.-born child a citizen. And so even after this case, you see scholars understanding that whatever the court is doing here, it is not embracing the full extent of English common law. To the extent it is embracing common law, it is an Americanized version of that. And I think that's perfectly consistent with both the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and also the original public meaning of the 14th Amendment.
We have more breaking news on this Friday night. Secretary of State Marco Rubio now ordering the U.S. to immediately stop almost all foreign aid and supplies, pending a review. That according to an internal State Department cable obtained by NBC News. Two notable exceptions here, Israel and Egypt. The State Department did not immediately return our request for comment. We want to go now to NBC Pentagon correspondent Courtney Kuby, who's following this. Courtney, what more do we know about why the Secretary of State is out with this order right now? And you mentioned that there's an exception, we believe, for Israel and Egypt. But what about Ukraine?
Yeah, so one thing is very clear in this order, and it is coming directly from the top. This is one of the executive orders that President Trump signed literally in his first hours after being inaugurated this week. And it was this idea that the U.S. would halt, temporarily at least, all foreign aid grants and not grant any new ones for a period of 90 days. Now, this, as I said, it's coming directly from President Donald Trump, but we're learning a little bit more about it today. The way that now Secretary of State Marco Rubio has implemented this to the State Department force around the world is by saying that there would be exceptions for, as you said, specifically military financing. So foreign military sales and financing for Egypt and Israel. And then there's also an exception for humanitarian emergencies. So that means that if you have a location where there is humanitarian aid, emergency disaster aid going to a place, that will continue in some cases. And in addition to that, Tom, the salaries of the people who will be distributing that, working to help with that humanitarian aid, they will also continue to be paid, including local people on the ground in those locations. So we know now that those are the exceptions. But you asked about Ukraine. It's not 100% clear at this point. Right now, as it is written, there is no indication that Ukraine will have any kind of an exception. They could go without this foreign aid for a matter of up to 3 months, Tom.
The Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, is setting its sights on the U.S. penny. Lydia, who is here with me now. So, we going to end production of the penny, Lydia?
You know what, Brian? DOGE is certainly reigniting this debate around the penny because I'm going to call this an open secret that's been circulating in Washington for decades, that it costs more to make a penny than it's actually worth.
Nigga, please.
So help me out here. I have this jar full of pennies. You can see it right here. How many pennies do you think are in this jar? Do you want to take a guess?
I think there's 300 in there.
I'll take 301.
You're both wrong. It's actually 500 pennies.
No kidding.
So check my math, but that's $5 worth of pennies.
That is.
But the cost to make this jar, by today's standards, more than $18.
Huh.
Because the cost of a penny today to make it is about 3.5 cents. Why is that? It's because the cost of zinc, which is a primary component of the penny, has just escalated so much. So last year, DOGE is pointing out that we spent $119 million on pennies, but we created only roughly $32 million of value circulating into the economy. So you might ask yourself, why are we still making all of these pennies? The answer is because some of our transactions in our economy are still based in cash. Think about all the small businesses that are still cashing out for that pack of gum that you want. They need a penny to give you change. But now, maybe you're like me and you just say, you know what, Madison, you keep that change. I don't need that change like jingling around in my pocket. That's what Canada is recognizing. Canada years ago actually eliminated the penny, and they made all their transactions actually round up to the nearest nickel so they could just create some efficiency there. There's some controversy about that. Some people say you're actually just costing the consumer more money by doing that. We actually need our penny. So DOGE is starting this conversation around what do we do with the penny? And the really interesting part is that Congress could actually make a decision about what to do with the penny, but the Treasury Secretary could also make a decision here. So that's a good question for Scott Bessent.
And now for something completely different.
Top 6 answers on the board. This is a good one. We asked 100 married women, name something you wish you could tell your husband, but you're afraid it would end your marriage.
Shut up.
Shut up.
That you had an affair.
That you had an affair. Ooh, yeah.
Not me.
You had an affair.
You are so busted.
Hi, how's it going?
Pretty good.
Okay. Reason I'm contacting you is we got a call. Someone said that you were here on the bench, and they thought that you were defecating on the bench.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I'm fine. I am fine.
Okay, what's that pile that's right underneath you?
Dog shit there.
Dog shit there?
Yep.
How'd the dog get under there?
Oh, you nasty.
What's your name, sir?
Andrew.
Andrew? What's your last name?
Rumful.
Rumfield?
Rumful.
How do you spell that?
Rumful. R-U-M-P-H-O-L. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm defecating.
R-U-M-P-H-O-L?
Yeah.
Andrew, what's your middle
Everybody
initial?
knows me. C.
And birthday?
Hey, show my ID if you want.
That's alright. You staying anywhere these days, or?
Yeah, just doing this, doing that.
You don't have a permanent address?
Not right now.
Do you have a phone number?
Not right now. No, I lost my phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You can type for me.
Yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. It's good.
He was sitting there all morning with no clothes on. Yeah, he just put his, or I don't know, looked like pajamas on, maybe an hour ago. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and he had that hand blanket. I sit over there with clothing. I'm in the inside. You can't quite see me in there, but yeah. You didn't have any clothes? Well, he had a shirt on. He had a shirt, but he wrapped that blanket around him. The reason why he happened to stand up. Yeah, I sit in there and watch, and you can see all the way from here down. Yeah. And he just put those on. I say no. I don't know what you're here for, but yeah, that's what we're here for. Oh, all right, all right, that's it. All right, okay, thanks.
We're checking and everything, huh?
Well, yeah, we did get the report that's yours. Because that's not an animal. Is there anything on the bench?
No.
You sure?
Yep.
You want to stand up?
Sure. Just a little bit.
I see a little bit there on the side.
Yeah.
How'd that get there? Thinking that's yours, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, can't be doing that on the bench. Right?
I know.
All right.
It happens, though.
Well, it can't happen there.
I thought I'd be fine, huh?
Yeah, can't do that. People want to come down and use the bench and not have to worry about that.
It's all right.
It's not all right, though. You can't do that. Ooh, where'd you get the rice?
Yeah, some guy bought it for me.
Oh, that was very nice.
You're not going to arrest me, are you?
No.
Okay, that's cool.
No, I just get a ticket.
Yeah, because I had cigarettes tonight. I don't want to go to jail, so.
I don't want you to go to jail either.
Yeah, I know. It sucks, man.
Just gotta get
It happens, man. I'm so sorry.
Well,
I really am.
next time, find somewhere else, okay?
Just be careful. I know.
Yep.
I know, buddy. It's cool. I know I should have sat and I should have went inside and went to the bathroom.
Yep.
I know.
Next time, though,
I
right?
should have. I knew it. I should have. They probably let me use the bathroom.
I'll tell you what you already know.
What's that?
No such thing as a routine stop.
That's the truth.
Joining us now is the Pulitzer Prize finalist and journalist who wrote the best-selling book, Case Closed, Lee Harvey Oswald and the Assassination of JFK. If anybody knows about this assassination, it's Gerald. Thank you so much for being here. Listen, you tweeted after this announcement and this executive order, transparency at last. There are a few thousand records that have still been withheld from the public. They're largely redacted or totally redacted. Why were they being withheld?
Yeah, you know, Elizabeth, you and I have talked over the years about some of the JFK file releases, and I never knew we'd come to an actual day in which a president ordered their full release. We have about 3,500 documents, as you said, still there. The CIA and others are fighting over their release by saying, gee, it has a name of a living asset, a human asset, an intelligence agent, someone who helped us. It's got some means of gathering intelligence. Trump is saying, forget all of that. These files are important enough. The American public has a right to know what their government knows about the assassination. And a lot of people have been suspicious, thinking that they're hiding some truth about a big conspiracy in there. So I think this is a good move. The devil will be in the details about exactly what the president, when he says everything's coming out, means, because there are tax files in there. Tax files are supposed to be sealed forever, but he may override that and have those tax files of Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby and others released as well.
I don't understand, though, the CIA saying there's the name of a living asset. That was 61 years ago. I mean, that living asset would be 80 or something?
They are in their 80s, because you have to think in the 1960s, when this was taking place, the assets that they had in Mexico City, where Oswald went only 6 weeks before the assassination, were sometimes people in the federal police or in the Mexican government who were in their 20s, who were providing information over to the CIA. So they're now in the mid 80s to late 80s. It seems as though there would be very, very few of those. And look, I've thought that the CIA has overmade its case. It was trying to protect its own bureaucratic reputation. I think these files it won't prove that they were behind the effort to kill the president, but I think they will be embarrassing to the agency about how much they knew that Oswald was unhinged in the weeks before the assassination. They never told the FBI. So to the extent the files show that, it will be embarrassing to the agency, and it should be, because we need to see these after all these years.
Let's talk about DeepSeek, because it is mind-blowing and it is shaking this entire industry to its core. The emergence of DeepSeek now putting pressure on the U.S. tech names. We told you all about it last week in Davos. The buzz started growing about DeepSeek's latest AI model being more efficient while running on a lot less advanced NVIDIA chips. Released last week, it's already being called what is a major breakthrough as the app shows its work, its reasoning. It answers users' prompts. I, by the way, was spent basically all weekend playing with it. It is the #1 app, I believe, on Apple right now. The product overtaking ChatGPT today as that on the App Store that way. DeepSeek, which was created by a Chinese hedge fund manager, also capturing the attention of leaders, as we mentioned at the World Economic Forum last week in Davos.
We should take the development out of China very, very seriously.
What we found is that DeepSeek, which is the leading Chinese AI lab, their model is actually the top performing, or roughly on par with the best American models.
If the United States can't lead in this technology, we're going to be in a very bad place geopolitically.
Now, you can take a look right now at the AI-related stocks. So NVIDIA, ARM, AMD, Microsoft, Meta, interestingly, on that list, given it's open source. We got to talk about the open source, closed source bit of this as well.
And then that's a shocker to see NVIDIA down by more than 12% right now.
Absolutely. And then you have global chip stocks also in the red across the board, ASML Holdings and others. There is the question, I will say, Alexander Wang made the point last week, and it's become sort of the question mark about all of this, which is, he suggested on our air that it is possible that they were using some of the highest performing NVIDIA chips, perhaps as many as 50,000 of them, to build this model. Now, and they weren't supposed to have those chips.
Right.
If
so
that's
the case,
true,
not the size.
The dynamic is different. Yeah. If it's not true, then maybe all bets are off. It's possible, by the way, even if it is true, meaning even if they use those chips to create this, or at least partially to create this, it is still a significantly more efficient and better model. I think everybody agrees that right this moment, I mean, I don't know if did you get to play? It is mind-blowing.
It looks really great. I mean, it feels like it's open source, so people can test this out themselves.
But I can tell you all the tests that I do just to see whether I think the writing is better, whether I think that it can answer certain questions. Yeah. I mean, it was not only faster, it was more human. The reasoning is shocking. I mean, there were moments where I was like, oh my God. We are so much. You could feel the step change as a person. I will also say, as exciting as it was, there was an element where I became scared because I thought, had the opportunity to talk to all these people last week, and they all said the future's here and da-da-da-da. And then you sort of see it, and you go, oh, okay, I feel you in a different sort of visceral way. So, yes, I think this is all happening at a level that when you mark your sort of AI history timeline in life, I think this past week, today, and everything else will be on it.
Eunice Yoon, let's turn to her in Beijing, who can help us understand some of the personalities behind this model, Eunice, and maybe shed some light on the theory that this is some kind of psychological operation.
Well, a lot of people here are feeling very good about this company now. The state media has been describing this as a major win for China, not only on a technological front, but also over Washington. The state media commentary has been very interesting, saying that China is a dark horse in AI. And Xinhua, the state news agency, has said that China AI now thwarts it's the U.S. technological curbs. Now, in terms of personality, a lot of the focus here has been on the founder of DeepSeek. His name is Liang Wenfeng, and he is the co-founder of a hedge fund called High Flyer. And a lot of the description has been about his rise from a small town, a rural city in the manufacturing belt of Guangdong, and then studying IT. His father was a primary education teacher, and then eventually rising to running this hedge fund and then backing this highly successful AI company. Among the Chinese entrepreneurs, he was among several Chinese entrepreneurs who met with the premier Li Qiang last week. One other interesting description of DeepSeek here is that it's being described as the PDD of AI. And of course, you guys are very familiar with Pinot Noir or PDD. And one of the ways in which PDD was able to really make a name for itself is that it was able to cut prices so much and really bring costs down among the retailers, such as Alibaba as well as JD. So people are really talking about here how this company, DeepSeek, has been able to do something similar for AI. Guys?
Yeah, I mean, Eunice, one of the big conversation points around here has been so much for the not sending the highest end chips to China. It hasn't mattered. They've been able to figure it out somehow. Is that part of the conversation as well that you're hearing?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's why I was, in the state media, a lot of it is we've been able to achieve something that wasn't really expected by thwarting the U.S. curbs. So you don't necessarily need, as much technology as maybe people had expected.
My name is Joe McNally. I'm the acting United States Attorney for the Central District of California. I'm joined here by Homeland Security Special Agent in Charge, Eddie Wong, and Cheryl Davies, the Director of Field Operations for Los Angeles Customs and Border Protection. We're here today to announce federal criminal charges against 9 defendants who worked with partners in China to operate a criminal network that illegally smuggled what we estimate to be more than $200 million worth of counterfeit goods from China into the United States through the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. The Los Angeles and Long Beach ports are the busiest container ports in the Western Hemisphere. Ensuring the integrity of who and what comes into our country is critical to our border security and ultimately to our national security. The 9 defendants charged in the indictment participated in a wide-ranging scheme to circumvent inspections at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. The scheme involved logistics companies, warehouse owners, and corrupt truckers. They worked as criminal partners to defy U.S. customs laws, to illegally smuggle enormous quantities of goods from China into the United States. 8 of the 9 defendants have been arrested. One defendant, the lead defendant, who orchestrated the scheme, is a fugitive and is believed to be in China.
This is a very different Donald Trump. He's leading a very different administration in the way he's attacking things, and the American public is very much more in line with him than they were at any point during his entire first term.
Well, I would say, correction, this is not a very different Donald Trump. This is a very different Donald Trump as being viewed by voters in this
In the way he's going about things with Susan Wiles leading things, I think he is, going at things in a much less disorganized fashion, much more organized.
Take me back in history.
Take you back in history. So it was so interesting to me that Donald Trump's first net approval rating of his second term is higher than his entire first term. And I was interested, has that ever happened? Has the second term net approval rating in the first month, have you ever had a higher rating than any net approval rating during the entire first term? Donald Trump is the only...
I have a hard time believing this.
This is 100% true. I went back. I love spreadsheets. Donald Trump's is the first guy ever whose net approval rating in the first month of his second term is higher than any rating that he had as an entire first term, Kate Baldwin. This is true. I don't make stuff up. The numbers are the numbers.
And that's the game!
You've disconnected from the hive mind. Explain.